Everybody hear me okay? Good. If you'd please join me in pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please take your seats. Sean, you want to establish quorum and call the roll, please?
Okay, I'll call your name. Just signify that you are here. President Joe Kilren.
Present.
Vice President Don Wells. Treasurer Frank Hennigan. Secretary Molly Knotts. Director Al Roper. And Director Marilyn Stout. And then be it shown that Director Jason Ward is absent.
Okay, thank you. That's 6 out of 7 quorums established, meetings called to order. I'd like to thank everyone in the audience for their attendance and your interest in the community. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Approval of minutes. Apologize for the late sending out of the minutes, but I guess we got them through yesterday. Received some minutes back. Does anyone have any more changes to the minutes of the September meeting? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Second. Motion approved and second. All those in favor? A. Opposed? None. Approved 6-0. Okay, with respect to the agenda items, before we get into the formal business of the agenda, we have among us one of a resident who has done a great deal of effort and participation on the Finance Committee. Don Swindell has been on the Finance Committee for well over 2 years now, and he's a real yeoman in really grunting out the work there and really has done a great job in supporting all that we do here from a financial standpoint. He's not only does it at budget time, but he does it throughout the years. That's probably why Frank looks so good with the financials, you know, and there's no probably, it is why. But basically, you know, we'd like to recognize and give a message of thank you to Don Swindell on behalf of the community. Frank and Sean, you want to just maybe say a few words?
Yeah, I worked with Don a lot this summer. It turned out that we have an excellent finance team. It turned out that Don was one of the people that were here throughout the summer. Oftentimes people are traveling, and he was instrumental in getting a lot of stuff done. He put together an Excel worksheet that we're doing the budget on, that we're going to have another meeting this coming week and finalize it. But he's worked great on almost anything that I asked him to work on.
Don, you want to come on up? Yep. And I'd just like to say the same thing that mirrors what they said. We get a lot of stuff done when you have all the Excel things and everything behind the scenes. I don't think I've met anybody in my life that loves doing Excel. So, but you save us a lot of time and you contribute a lot to this community. So on behalf of Sandoval, we'd give you the Star Award, and then we're going to be sending you and your wife out for dinner as well. So, thank you very much.
You know, Don, it's not often you get called an aberration and you like it, you know, but thank you. Again, today we'll be following the regular board meeting format. We're going to have 2 comment sections, one on agenda topics, and then just prior to executive session, we'll do the open agenda or non-topic comment section. Just from a point of order, if you wouldn't mind, please, following the general procedure we have in place where residents are asked to limit their discussion to 3 minutes, no pulling, And on the agenda topics, just stick to the agenda topics. Do you have the sign-in sheet, Sean? Okay. So that dispenses of that item. None there. We'll just move on to the next. Uh, Any director request to adjust the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll maintain the agenda as written. Uh, just a general comment with respect to housekeeping on upcoming board meetings. The November meeting, again, will be a meeting that will include both the board and a special members meeting. It's going to be held December 13th, which is not a Thursday, it's a Tuesday. I'm sorry, November 13th. There was a request made prior to this meeting to consider maybe adjustment on the December date, which would typically fall on the third Thursday, which would be December 20th. And recognition that that's pretty darn close to Christmas, there may be some vacation period. We're going to take that under advisement. I got to check a few things on other calendars, and we'll come back and see if we can adjust that and have a better acclimation of that date to people's schedules. So that one may be changed off of December 20th. Okay, President's report. Again, I truly will be short tonight. I'm going to start off again with the financial outlook and just in general, we remain in sound financial shape. In short term, of course, we're going to have some focus on both the expansion and the Taylor Morrison activity on the claims. But systems are pretty well in place and processes are pretty well in place to manage both of those activities. So I think that it's appropriate, and as we've been talking about for the last several months, we're going to continue that focus on the long term, making sure that we're adjusting the financial parameters and the budgets and are forward thinking to include those things that are going to really provide us good sustainable financial position through the next several years. In particular, what I was talking about there was attention to things like storm recovery and lake health and making sure that they're incorporated into our planning and into the manner in which we modify and progress our finances. And enough said about that now. There'll be more coming in the budget meeting probably in that. Frank, you may want to pick up this in your report as to some of the things there. Just from a big picture financial standpoint, again, I'm going to reemphasize the three things that are pretty key to us. That is being the balance sheet, which remains strong. And Frank, I won't step on your numbers. Just say that we remain $1 million over what the statute requires us to be. So even though in light of all of the spending we've done recently on and will be doing on the pool, we're still holding our own on the reserves. Also, as to cash flow and cash coverage, we're still in pretty good position cash flow and coverage-wise. And the P&L standpoint, with revenues covering expenses, that seems to be on a good trajectory and still in a good condition there. So having said that, things are looking pretty darn good financially. And basically, if you look at what we have in the reserve account, and again, I won't say the number, Frank, but by the time we get to the expansion groundbreaking of June or July next year, we're going to have in excess of what is necessary to complete the project. And we're, probably about 70% down the road on having that amount at this time. So we got 7 more months or so to do that, and we'll have plenty. It'll cover the full project and then some. And we'll continue to build that surplus over the next few years, and that's going to provide us a good barrier against future base assessment increases for a period of 6 or 7 years, and or if the community in its best interest wants to do other things from a project standpoint, it will reduce the amount in that surplus. But that's a good cushion for us to prevent having to go out and reaching the residents' pockets for additional money. Um, I guess from a sales standpoint, still a good sales month last month. We had 5 new sales and 8 resales, which contributed about $34,000 into the reserves from that amount. Taylor Morrison, that brings the total home count through September up to 1,401. So that officially on the books, there's 24 closings to be done, and Taylor Morrison will be completely out of here. I'm told that they pre-sold a bunch of those 24, and they're down to about 6 more left for sale. So they pre-sold 18 that are on the books, and if they close those, that means they need to sell 6 more, and they're completely out of here. Just to emphasize a little bit about the importance of the long-term sustainability and having a good financial plan in place. As I mentioned, we're spending probably about $220,000 on the pool in this next month or so. And we've had other spending this year. We're going to end up spending probably a little bit over $300,000 if just general talking terms from reserves. And not one penny of that reserve money's come out of residents' pockets. And I think that to be able to sustain that position in which both base assessments are sustainable without a lot of requirements from our own residents here, and also reserves are being maintained properly and or expanded as need be into the future for things is very important. And we're doing that also from not people who live here. It's being done from new people coming in. Just like you might pay a fee to enter a country club, well, we have a nice asset here, and the resales piece is really on the purchaser. And that may be manipulated between the buyer. You know, you can't be not cognizant that there may be a little bit of horse trading going on, but still in all, that's a little bit of a fee to get in here. And it helps have them have a little bit of skin in the game as to what their reserve and asset base is here. And to the extent that we continue to improve that asset base and do it in a manner that's sustainable from a financial position is very important for the community. Not only does it increase the value to each of us individually who live here, but it makes it more attractive for others to come in here, and that in itself helps pump prices too. So that's the strategy, and hope we can execute it. There's a plan in place, and we'll be talking more about that with the budget. As far as transition activities, I guess everyone was in receipt of the announcement on Monday that we have actually noticed Taylor Morrison, which hopefully will begin a process in which we'll have a pre-litigation negotiation period. We have not heard back from Taylor Morrison yet. I suspect that they're internally trying to digest that, and from a legal standpoint, trying to figure out how to approach us with it. I would expect we'll hear from them fairly soon, and we'll begin that process. I'd like to remind everyone that very important in that process, and as an added leverage point, is the fact that if we can have an indication of public and resident support in being able to proceed with litigation as a means to an end. In other words, having a good supported resident base behind us, and when we go into negotiations, and Taylor Morrison recognizing that we're willing to take the step into litigation is in itself a very strong position to be in entering negotiations with them. So the vote's encouraged to be positive on that, and hope that we can gain the resident support to do it. Doesn't mean we're going to do litigation, but the point is that will be helpful as a means to an end in preventing us from having to do litigation. And we're well prepared to do litigation at this point if we have to. We've done a lot of homework in that area. again, that's on phase one and phase two areas. That's what the complaint's about. Phase three will be based on turnover. That's not part of the litigation right now. And to the extent that Taylor Morrison does as they should and is in compliance and code and all those things, it'll never get to litigation. If there's an issue with it, it'll get thrown back into the claims piece, just like anything else that we have in phase one and phase two. Hopefully, we'll never get to that point. Again, just to wrap our rounds around the November meeting, both of those issues will be in front of the public, and we had the board had recognized both the Reynolds amendment and the consent to proceed with litigation in that November board meeting. It was noticed for the 15th. The board is in receipt of, board members are in the receipt of a Becker and Polikoff package put together for formal notice of that, and a resolution included in that. I would like to elicit the board's support in affirming that resolution so that we can go ahead with that mailing package next week. Everyone has received that? Okay. Do I have a motion to accept that resolution and package? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so show that resolution as being passed, Molly, and 6-0. Thank you. So we'll go ahead with the mailing. Sean, you'll probably start that mailing the end of next week? Okay, okay. The rest of my items are really covered under agenda topics, the expansion and phase 3 turnover, gate 3. I guess the only comment on gate 3, Maryland, the city's doing well on it, but we're not sure. It hasn't hit the consent agenda yet. So, yeah. Frank, could you pass that on?
I talked to the city manager on Monday, and he assured me that he would have an answer for me this week. Thus far, I haven't heard anything from him, and as you know, it's been going on for months. When it's at least 6 weeks, 2 months ago, when he told me the final outcome, but it's still not come forward. And City Council will not be meeting again for a voting agenda until November. So it can't be before then.
Okay. Thank goodness in that project in itself will be very short-term in completing. It's knocking out that center barrier. If the board would be in agreement, I would suggest that we go ahead and pursue bids for doing that on the assumption we're going to have it. And we have a shovel-ready project. No, not Obama shovel-ready, but our shovel-ready projects. But, yeah, Don.
Included in that bid, if you notice at the gate,
The corner.
we need an area that it needs to be removed so that
Yeah.
a truck already has come in the gate by the resident side and run on the grass. And that needs to be taken out and expanded.
It's being bid actually tomorrow. We have Haunch in there with a bid.
That's another good example of trusting TM, because TM ensured us that would be part of their process in cutting off that corner. Technically, we can't hold them to it because it's on our property and it's something that we asked to have done. But it's difficult to trust what you're told unless it's in an agreement. So.
I would encourage all residents to drive out there and look, and you'll see where the truck has been in the grass and why it needs to be done. Picture of 1,000 words.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right. Frank, I told you I'd be brief. I'm brief. Go ahead. Your turn, Treasurer's report. And I didn't touch one of your numbers.
No, not many. Yeah. Just to go through the surplus, each month we're really putting in about $54,000 into surplus. So right now we got $1,627,000. and it was 54,000 in the current month. So we should be just shy of $1.8 million at the end of the year. So surplus-wise, as far as expansion, as Joe said earlier, we should be in very good shape by the time we'll be well past what we need by the time we put the first shovel in the ground. The reserve, because of the pool, actually went down for the month. It went down $42,000. We paid about a third up front for the pool area. That was $76,000. We had a good month in sales, that new homes and resales, so that amounted to 34,000. So 34 from the 76 left 42. So it went down $42,000. It's now at $2,207,000, still in very good shape. As Joe mentioned earlier, the sales for the month were 5 new sales, and it got us to 40 for year to date. And we started out needing 64 to totally get Taylor Morrison out of here to get up to 1425. But as Joe said, there's only about 6 that really need to be sold. And we had 8 resales. So we're at 92 in resales. And I wanted to spend a little time on this.
Excuse me, Frank. Molly, if you could just note that Jason in attendance for the record. Thank you, Jace. Hi, Jace. How you doing? I'll catch you up, Jason, afterward on the things that we just did. So go ahead, Frank. I'm sorry.
Resales are really key because that's all we're going to have to replace existing assets. And resales come, so you hope that we continue to have them. Now we're at 92. Last year we were at 103 for the full year. At this pace, we're going to be at 120. And I know economics comes into play, as far as the economy. But a good portion of this, I believe, took place because of the condition of our community. You got to put money back into the community to have people wanting to buy in here. So it's not by chance that we're at 92. Just before I got in here, I called up a friend of mine that's in real estate, and I asked him what was the average sale price of homes in 2017 and what they are now in 2018. He was only able to give it to me for single-family homes, and he gave me the median price. The median price for 2017 was $290,000, and the median price in 2018 was $310,000. So we are selling houses $20,000 more expensive, and we're selling them at a quicker rate. So it tells you a lot of people want to move in here. So that's why, and the only reason they want that is the place has to look good. And the 3 key conditions are amenities, landscape, and lakes. So we have to put money into each of these and make sure they look good. And then I think it's going to be like a win-win-win. We're going to be happy to be living in here. We're going to have plenty of money to take care of all these assets. And, so again, this is when I give this number, it's really key to see, to look at that. We really do need putting money back into the community. Really, we get it back because the third thing is your house price will go up. So there's 3 key things. Your house price will go up. You're happy to be living here, and we'll have money to keep replacing, all our fixed assets. So that's really a key number, and I honestly believe because of the decisions the board made, where we redid the dock, we spent a lot of money in real estate. We're redoing the pool. All of those, realtors are talking about the expansion that's taking place. All of those things have impacts on people wanting to move in here. And when they move in, money goes into this bucket, and the price of your house goes up because there's a bigger demand to move in. So it was just something that I say it oftentimes each month, and I don't think I put enough emphasis on it, that taking care of our community is really important to keep the value of your homes up. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Frank. General Manager's report.
All right, I'm going to go through a bunch of info as I go through this. If you have questions from the board, then just chime in as I'm going through it. Number one is the road, sidewalk, and club safety. What we're trying out is trying to get a better visual on the crosswalks. And one of the things that we're trying to do is that there's an MUTCD standard that we're using the same type of equipment they use in the municipalities. So we are going to be trying, this one's actually a mobile unit that we use at the club when we have events, but we're going to be putting one out on one of the intersections that actually has more of a square base. And our goal number one is to make sure these don't get run over by the vehicles. But I've seen these on a couple of municipalities that I was out on Longbow Key. I saw a couple of these, and I think Don saw some up north as well, Pennsylvania. So these are roughly about 300 is the cost, and obviously the volume that we purchase, we get these at a better rate. So we're going to try one and then see how it's viewed and how it takes abuse out on the roads. Okay, B is crosswalk painting. This is another area I see that in some of the crosswalks in the very center section, we're getting some of the paint lift. So I'm reviewing with the vendor to see if there's actually something that might be a little more durable and or visible for those areas, which I'll report back to the board. C is part of the project for the cement, and this one is we're actually doing a sidewalk in what is the most dangerous intersection. Right now, if you came in the Ped Gate and then you were headed over to Somerville, there's some little blocks that you walk across, but there's not really a sidewalk. On that, we'll be taking it farther north, winding around, and then connecting onto the other side. And this is perspective for November. It looks like what's going to be done. D is the club pavers. We have paver company Bastos coming in the next several weeks to clean up any of the areas where we've had, it's mainly trees that push pavers up. We've taken out a couple trees here at the club. It's some you can actually fix the pavers, others it's just so bad, like the one over here that we actually took out the tree on it. E, sidewalk and curbing cement replacements, and the grinds are scheduled prior to Thanksgiving. In your category, you all see the honk construction. The original project approved by the board was from Collier Paving for $58,000. The problem with Collier Paving is they have the jobs lined up where it's actually not going to be till the end of January or February until this gets done. We rebid it with one of the other vendors that had a strong interest on honk. We actually have a large reduction in price because what they're going to do on some of the areas where we were going to pour sections, their feeling is they can do grinds on it. So it's took our bid price from $58,000 to $48,350, so about a $10,000 savings. This is slated prior to Thanksgiving that this will be done. F is the pavers in Barclay Park, where we actually contracted with Crawford. We're going to be removing the pavers down there. Again, it's the oak trees. In that area, we're not taking out any oak trees, but it's just not going to work with the pavers where we have the benches. So we're going to be using the egg rock on that. And G is one that I will actually talk about either at the next meeting or the end of the year meeting. And it's we've looked at this in the past, and this is one as we grow that there's going to be a strong consideration for, and that is a second defibrillator. The defibrillator we have is in the gym. What's that? You have a defibrillator? Really? That's okay. What that is if you have anybody that goes into cardiac arrest, things like that. We've been very fortunate, our club, that we haven't had that in 12 years. We've never used the machine. Is it going to happen eventually? It will. And your risk areas generally are the gym. And then when you get outside towards the pool, one of the concerns is that right now if you had to come in, we actually timed it. You have about a 3-minute in and out if you know where the machine is at. And 3 minutes on a cardiac arrest is a lot of time. So what we're looking at is a unit that's actually weatherproof. It would likely be recommended that it's not inside the gate area because that way it could be utilized for if it was somebody on bocce but somewhere on the rear of the club is the consideration on that.
I was going to suggest for board meetings, but
board meetings. We've actually, in talking to my employees, there's 2 of them that have actually used this multiple times on other sites. One of them used it 3 times, and the other used it twice. So it's rare that we haven't had one here, but we'll come back with the pricing on that.
Sure. As I mentioned to you earlier, it would be nice if it was a class. I know that people tell me it's self-explanatory, but I would have no idea when to put this on, if I was helping a person or hurting a person by putting this on. So maybe if they had a class.
They're in basic CPR instruction.
We're looking. We have all the employees, or the class is taught by John Nichols, a resident. He's a fireman, and he's actually up right now with the hurricane victims. But when he gets back, I think it's a great idea that we can try to educate people on it. Okay, the second one, this is a very popular one, is Halloween night. All right, Halloween night. We really beef up the security that night with the law enforcement, and the reason for that is when you have crowds, obviously you want to make sure that you have a safe environment for the residents and their guests. What we generally use is between 13 and 15 officers and deputies. What we've contracted with is our goal initially was to have all of Cape Coral PD. It's a little bit harder to do that though because it's just there's so many things going on that night. So we used what we could from the Cape PD, and we're going to be using a joint force with the PD and Lee County Sheriff. The Cape Police Department has 1 sergeant, 3 officers that are on bicycles. This is something new for this year. They started a bicycle patrol, and they'll be able to get in and out of the crowds much easier. They'll have 1 supervisor and 5 road officers with their vehicles, and then from the Lee County Sheriff's Department, we'll have 1 sergeant that'll be the team leader with 4 road deputies. The detail will have 15 law enforcement officers. In addition to that, we'll have 2 EMS techs. What they do is the same problem. Is it's very hard to get an EMS unit in here if we ever needed it with the crowds. So they actually bring in a little mobile unit. It's like a golf cart, and it has all of the same, just like last year, have the same features that the EMS has, so that if we ever had anything. And they used it, I think, twice last year. One guy had low blood sugar, which on Halloween night I think is hard to figure out, but they helped him out with that. And then myself, and I'll have 1 staff member here. The gates will shut down at 5 p.m. for the guest traffic. For the residents, they can come in at any time. We just have asked them to be aware there's going to be lines, and also if you don't have to come back during that time, please don't, so that we don't have any traffic with the pedestrians on the street. The question we had, the last one, was will Pine Island entrance, if it's going to be used as an extra guest entry, or if the law enforcement considers it's more of a liability. The recommendation from the PD is that we do not use it. We lock that down where you have 1 primary guest entrance, which will be the veterans entrance. The mobile light units are brought in. We'll have Sunbelt Rental come in with, we have, I believe, 4 of these that come in that we light all of the gate areas, and then the 1 area on the Esplanade. And to date, and this number actually changed, I wrote this this morning, we had 137 guest tickets sold thus far. $3 fee is what we're charging to recoup our money for law enforcement. We're up to $411 on the amount of money that we've recaptured. People can pay with their credit cards. They can pay with cash or check. I wrote that this morning. Carol came in before the meeting, said that we've sold probably another 50 or 60 since then. So you'll estimated you'll probably be somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 wristbands. Wristbands actually have, they say, Sandoval Halloween on them, so we can't have anybody cheat us and use last year's wristband. Okay, project updates. Again, if you got questions as I go through this, the pool project. You want me to touch on this now, Joe, or wait till?
No, go ahead. You can do it now. We can cover it here, I guess.
The pool project will start on this Monday. The crews will be out here at about 7 in the morning, draining the pool. The last really big hurrahs this weekend, so I've got a little extra staffing going on Saturday and Sunday because I'm anticipating a big load in the pool. And then Monday's the start date. In contract, we have it for 6 weeks. Beyond 6 weeks, it costs the company $1,000 a day for anything that goes beyond that, so they have incentive. So the clock starts, and you can figure the math on when prospectively we're going to open back up. The first thing they'll do is drain the pool, and then after the pool will not be completely drained when they get in to do the demolition. They do that because they like to keep the water for the ballast in there, so there'll probably be about 1.5 foot of water up to the step. They'll be ripping out all of the old tile, and then when they actually get ready to do the surface about a week into it, that's when they do the full drain. We're going to set up construction fencing because the last thing I want is somebody in the area that's not with the construction crews, but I do encourage both the board and the residents, if you want to come down, it's going to be neat to see this large of a project, and Al's going to be working closely with me on it too, with the vendors. Appreciate it, Al. Okay, the lightning system, we're just about to go live. I believe that's what I was checking before we came into here to see if everything is working on it. And I know the vendor was out here today, and I'll figure where we're at with that. But the unit is installed, and then we have a unit in here to control as well. So I'll keep the board updated on that. One of the areas, this will be our landscape chairman that notes this too, but this really looks great, is the date palms as you come in the front of the community were all trimmed. But they did a trim on them that's a little bit different. They sort of shaped them, so it just has a nice country club look as you come in, veterans. Okay, D is in Vera. We're slated. I met with the vendor who was out here this morning trying to commit to when we're actually going to be doing this, but it looks like it's within the next week, up to 10 days at the max probably, is the card readers are going to be moved to on the resident entry lanes to the resident side, and the driver's side, I'm sorry. And what this is for is so that we have a lot of people that come back that have rental cars right now that are forced to go to the kiosk. So they'll be able to use their Sandoval card to swipe the same way that a bicycle does when they come in. So that'll be good. The resident property inspection teams, I've got a couple more people to contact, but we've established 3 teams with our team leaders. Each one will be visiting the different sites, and the evaluation form, you can all take a look at this, the board members. This is what will be filled out, and the goal is so that we don't have opinions on these. The goal is so that this is strictly data-driven to analyze the sites of the 3 prospective vendors, and then these are due back on the 26th, which will all be sent to each one of the board members so that we have consideration for the residential contract that's we're deciding for the budget.
I mentioned to Sean that after this, I mentioned to Sean that and after these groups have is it on? After these groups have all met, that the 3 groups get together and meet themselves and compare the notes of what they've seen at each of these communities, and when they come before the board with their presentation, that there is a cumulative report also, because that way the ones who have actually seen the sites will be able to make a better recommendation than us trying to digest what's on a sheet of paper, and I think to add that one more piece in the puzzle would be beneficial.
Have we adopted that?
Yeah, we can, if
okay.
you want. So, yeah.
I mean, it's a good recommendation. I think as long as you adopt it, it's fine.
Okay, the F is the mulch final prices. The big thing that we're looking at on this is the comparison on the spray-in mulch like we did last year versus the bagged mulch. And when you get into the residential areas, typically the bagged is there's a lot of benefits to it on being able to get the application on the thickness. On the common areas, there's a big price difference on the spray-in versus the bag. So we're completing our prices, but it looks very likely that we'll be using the spray truck again for the mulch. One of the other considerations that we do is in areas on fence lines we use pine straw, and the reason for that, it's about a 2-to-1 on the price on areas that aren't as visible to get coverage. And then the last one on there was the with the recent, this is just the ped gate. This area gets abused up front. We did some welding on it, but we ordered some heavier springs for our gates to try to correct that problem. Okay, number 4 this is a large item. This one, I'm going to be doing a GM meeting, which I'll open up to everyone, and then I will also have a little PowerPoint that I'll work with the Lakes group so that we have everything together on this. And it's on the topic of aeration. As we start to age on these lakes, the first question is there an alternative to aeration? And there's a variety of different things that can be factored into a lake for healthiness, but aeration really is at the top of the food chain on what you're going to be doing on a lake. The only lake in here currently that has aeration is the interior lake on Somerville, and we can track the data. When Jim gets up here, you're welcome to say something on that, Jim. But the Somerville Lake really has a minute problems, and it's really sort of the exemplary lake that we have versus the problems that we've had in the other lakes. This year, the focus has really even been drawn more on this because of the fish kills. And the fish kills, we obviously had a vendor factor into it with their treatment, but it's also the fact that as the lakes age, that dissolved oxygen gets lower as well. So we're dealing with several companies, but there's 2 big players in the Lee County market, which are going to be Solitude and the company that we have, and the other company is Vertex. At this point, Vertex is very impressive. The thing that separates them from the other companies is they actually manufacture their own product. So they have a warranty on it. They service the product that they actually make. The other thing that was very impressive is when you start to come up with a plan and you start to see that the numbers long term, it gets into a big cost when you're considering 23 lakes that you're considering aeration on, and it's how you would stage this in. One of the biggest cost considerations is not the motor and the pumps, it's the electric on how you're going to get it to that location. And one of the things that they've come up with is sort of a unique way that they do it is they use the 1 meter where you'll have 2 pumps next to each other servicing 2 different lakes, and it actually goes through the lake cut through. So it saves you money on the install, which is significant. What I will do is when we get everything there, I'll send all the final prices to the board, and this would be a large ticket item that we're looking at as a long-term strategy. Just so that when I do my thing with the residents, I'll have these same slides so that everybody can see everything. But to give you an idea, in that pic, you can see that this is what the motor looks like. It's usually it can be, depending on the size of your lake, between 1/3 and 2 horsepower on the motor. The cool thing about these motors is one of the questions I had is if you actually get in where we have the storm and you have a hurricane or something like that, obviously we don't want to lose our investment. When you look at the bottom pick, what you can see is that blue cord coming out of there. They actually either do a coupling or sometimes it's just set up where you can cut that cord. And you actually, if you had a hurricane that was going to hit, you would define your risk and you would actually remove these whole units that we would bring them in there. The other considerations, things that I saw were the size of the hosing, which is one of the problems that some of the companies have is they use the flex hose, and what they do is they actually try to weight it down, which is sort of the old school. The way that they do it is with a heavier hose that doesn't require that, but it's got a thicker mill, so it doesn't crimp or kink on there. And then the pictures in the middle section are actually showing you what goes on the bottom of the lake where the aeration comes out of that. And the number of those units per lake is established by their engineer. And the engineer from their company actually was out here with the sonar that mapped out about half of our lakes so far. So we'll have all of that.
If I just might mention, Sean, just to put it in perspective, this is one of the 2 longer-term sustainability issues that we're trying to deal with, to make sure that we do it in a manner that doesn't upset the financial apple cart, and to do it in a way that can be programmed over time, but satisfactorily address the risk that we're facing. And again, the storm recovery potential was one thing. The long-term plan on the lake's quality, water quality, is the second. And what we tried to do in the last number of months that we've been talking about this, probably over a year now, we wanted to make sure that the information being provided was actionable, good technical information, and a good basis for making determining what might be a proper intervention technique to extend the vitality of the lakes over a long period of time. We're at a point right now in looking at that data where we're convinced that we have a pretty good handle on the parameters and what the base is for a number of lakes, in particular the 6 lakes that have been most problematic for us. So the program would include a process going forward of looking at maybe 3 tranches of 6 lakes to get us up to the 16 or the 17 or 18 lakes that are needed. Do this over a period of time, hitting the most difficult to attain ones first, but also to do that with sourcing the economic basis for doing this and the capability to do it in a sustainable manner, and to consider not going into resident pockets again to do that, to do it in a manner that looks at it has to be a reserve activity because it's a capital expenditure item. When you add to reserves, you have to accommodate it with a funding source. So as part of the projected 2019 budget, that reserve requirement will be a basis for the budget, and the funding source will be included on the reserve support mechanism within that budget. And that's the process we're looking for. Again, the key to it is to look at and evaluate those long-term risks that we haven't compensated ourselves for or protected ourselves against right now, and to evaluate options to protect ourselves. And those options best done in a manner that doesn't affect resident pocketbooks within our community, but look to outside or unique ways of trying to do that. And there are options out there. It can be a situation in which the current residents benefit as a result of being attractive and more people desiring to be here, just along the same lines as Frank was attracting. That's all I'll get into now, but as we talk about the budget, you'll see how this is going to be done, I think. So, sure, Marilyn.
Everyone knows that we have had a problem with the blue-green algae as well as the red tide. One of the citizens bought an aeration equipment and put it in the canal behind his house, and the before and after pictures were amazing. I mean, it just totally cleaned up that canal. And I don't know what type of aeration other than the fact that they recommended it to the city.
Yeah. Well, just from a personal familiarity standpoint, I've been involved in a lot of waste improvement opportunities, including Love Canal and other things. And basically, the design through which Vertex arrived at what is necessary was very sophisticated. I looked at all the engineering technical aspects of it, a very good system. And there's no doubt that aeration is a sustaining capability upon lake vitality from a dissolved oxygen standpoint, probably the best way to do it. I think probably it's within our grasp. It's here right now. We have the opportunity to do it. It's timely to do it, and I think it fits in the long-term vitality of the community too. So I think it's all coming together. I think we're getting there. So. There, let me correct Sean. Sean's non-engineering, but it's a compressor, and it's not a rotating compressor. It's a piston compressor, and it's these are at 2 to 2.5 horsepower. They're sized by lake and load, and you look at things like the depth of the lake, the striation of dissolved oxygen through the lake, and the turnover requirement for that body of water based on the surface area and volume of the lake. You determine how many diffusers you need, what the airflow has to be, and what back pressure you need to support that. And that's how you size your compressors. And then you look at what Sean was mentioning is it's very important that to minimize cost in this, that it's a lot easier to pump air through pipes than it is to run electrical, or a lot less costly to run electrical to each location. So they've optimized it in a strong way. And I just tongue in cheek, I'm just kidding with them a little bit, but very sophisticated process and good compressors. They're good compressors.
Well, Joe's actually on the money though. The what's in the picture is the one that they brought out as a sample is 1/3 of a horsepower. The majority of them are going to be 2 to 2.5. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
What they try to do as a general rule is you're trying to turn over that lake twice in a day. So when you're figuring the volume, that's what determines. Similar to a pool, but you're not. With a pool, you're pumping water. On this, you're pushing air on it. The other consideration, I'll move on, but I just wanted you guys. This is a big ticket item. I just wanted to cover a little bit. But the other question was, how do you clean these things? Do you have to send a diver down to the bottom, or we're going to have an added expense? And the answer to that is no. They've got sort of a unique system that those heads rotate, so you can actually do there's a valve that you switch right in the motor thing that allows it to pulsate, and it moves that head to clean it. So that's the only one that had that thus far.
Yeah, their diffusers are unique in that it's a rubber-based product with perforations in it. So if it's relaxed and there's no pressure on it, there's no holes. When you put air pressure on it, it opens up and those holes open up. So by pulsing it, you get the compression when through the holes being condensed, and then it opens up and it relieves whatever clutters in them. So it's a pretty neat technique. So
the last thing before I move on too is just the operating cost has to be factored into this as we do the budget. And the biggest concern is the electricity to run one of these things. The initial concern is we have that fountain out there, and that fountain, the lowest electric bill that I've had on that on a monthly basis this year is $340 for the month. But that is a submersible 5 horsepower motor. The motor's massive. It's much different. You're pushing water straight up. These are generally what they're saying. It's more in the $50 range to run one of these things, so it's not a huge expense.
And I'd just like to acknowledge Maryland's role in what the city has done too, in that the city has really gone out there and been pretty proactive in addressing the blue algae issues, and basically that's all a matter. It's probably more so a management issue than it is a technical issue, in that the releases are just really done in a manner that really doesn't have the seacoasts at their best interest in probably farming and recycling high levels of nutrients into lakes and preventing stuff from going southbound, and the composition of that board coming from a lot of campaign support of money to get them in those positions, and some affiliations with that. But having said that, Maryland has been instrumental with the city in advancing the city's experimental plus the lobbying effort to go after the management, the water management people, to address the way in which they were doing the releases, to optimize releases and maximize those in the dry season, and to minimize them in the wet seasons. And thank you, Marilyn, for your role in that. It's been great.
Actually, the city council has approved to move forward with 3 other cities, possibly 4, on a lawsuit with the South Florida Water Management District headquarters, because there were 5 mayors that went over to, I think it's Boca Raton, but I'm not sure. It's on the West Coast, maybe West Palm Beach. Anyway, they went over and spoke and asked for, during the dry season, to have a higher release, and they elected not to do it. But no one that serves on that board, it lives on water.
Yeah.
There was and they're all governor appointed, but they're all connected to agriculture, and so that's why there was no impact, and why it was decided to file suit.
Yeah, and the basic problem stems from the fact that that dam was there, and a dam has certain level requirements so that it doesn't breach. And when they put that dam in, it prevented southward flow. And then the priorities of the board seem to be, number one, making sure that in the dry season there's enough irrigation water for the farmers, so they don't want to release anything during the dry season. And priority 2, getting the recycle stream back at a heavy nutrients beyond that, so that they don't lose the water out of it, but then in the wet season it flooded. So that, your ebbs and peaks. but thank you for the efforts. So that's enough of that stuff. We beat that one to death.
All right. What I'll be doing is we'll have a follow-up GM meeting too, because I want the residents to see the same picks and questions. This is going to be a large topic, so that we can air this out.
Well, I think it's important too to differentiate between our internal problem here and the problem in the canals, because it's different. But the residual problem too is that with the toxins that can be as a result of being airborne, that's an unknown right now, and so we're all going to face that, and we can't get away from it because we live in Sandoval. It's our community outside us that's coming in at us. So.
They're trying to design it for residential, and that's another big thing with this company. Some of them actually, plot them right on the right-of-ways for the residential. And if you go down to Somerville, you'll see that the box, it's not very large, and it doesn't make a lot of noise. It's less noise than an air conditioner, but you have a meter, and that meter's on a stanchion that's a cement stanchion about probably 3 feet tall. So the goal is to try to get those locations. They're trying to get everything on common area or out of the way on the residential.
Yeah, I think you answered him incorrect. He meant on common area as opposed to residential. Their initial, some of them probably have difficulty relocating. They'll have to work out something with the residents, but most of them will be able to be on common areas. So, and that's going to cost us a little bit more, but that's, it's part of the game, I think.
Okay, the last category, just other things, a couple things to touch on. I was going to go over today. It's a little bit bigger topic, though. I want to make sure that I have this, that I'm giving you guys enough information, because what the goal is on this is it's coming up with a price recommendation to the board for the percentage on some of our vendors that offer things. And what really brought this topic up was we had a soccer camp that there was 50 kids per week at, I think it was $150 per child, and they offered it for 2 weeks. And when you figure out the math on what that thing grossed, probably $10,000 or $15,000, the HOA had very little recovery on that. We have liability on the insurance. We have the impact on this of our club and the pool on things. So the goal was we also met with the gentleman that he's done tennis camps here for a long time. and he's looking at the possibility of wanting to do that again, which I think would be a cool thing for the kids. But we were asking him on the comparable areas what kind of fee back to the club he pays, and it's a percentage, 10% back to the club. But there's a threshold, and the threshold is done for the same reason. Like we have an exercise class in here, and if you started charging when you have 5 or 6 people in the exercise class in the off season, you're probably going to lose the class. So it's trying to come up with what the threshold would be to make this comfortable for the vendors. But on the same token, if somebody's making that kind of money, that the club is compensated. The other half of the equation, which I'll put in there, and this one tends to be a standard rate that we've seen on all the Pope properties, but it's going to be a big issue here, is when you get this turned into a large gym, you're going to have every personal trainer and their brother wanting to train in here. The standard rate that they do is 30% to the house on the personal training. Typically, people buy packages of 8 or 10 trainings, and you establish relationships with the trainers that are qualified with the proper insurance is how you do it. But what I'm going to do is I want to put it together so you can actually see what comparative clubs are. I think it's a large enough topic. I just don't want to speculate on it.
Sure.
B is this one I'm going to continue. I'm going to tell you what we're doing unless any of you feel differently. I don't really need a resolution, but we've been charging $500 for, these are aggressive gate hits by driver error. These are the people that are flying through the gate behind somebody. They crush the drop arm. We have to send a guy either out there to either reset it. Even if it doesn't break the arm, what happens is on consecutive hits, when it eventually that thing's going to need replaced. This is used, the number we came up with was Envira has a lot of other communities that use the same figure. And we are fair, like if there's something that's a gray area or things like that, then we look at it. But it's trying to make sure that we recover damages on gate hits. We have a new facility operations supervisor, the person that's going to be helping me with some of these things, and his name's Pete DiGiacomo. I'll introduce the board to him, but this is going to be one of his functions as well. As we've got, sometimes you'll have a lot of these that you'll have 3 or 4, and it just becomes a process of looking at video and recapturing the money from these individuals. And Frank's been with me on a couple of these that I've, if we looked at video and the people have come in, we're always fair, but it's costing the HOA money that we need to continue recovering it. Okay, the last several ones we have are Pete again is going to be doing the violations. This is a large ticket item. What we've been doing on the violations, like other HOAs, is you have the company that you're contracted with provides a violations person that comes in, does the violations, and then you send the letters out to the homeowners. Some of the things that happen, though, is in that position, it's for a CAM, it's typically an entry-level position. It's not somebody that they have intent to someday be a GM, things like that, but you'll have a turnover of the employees, so it's hard to track. And this isn't specific to Pope. I've dealt with other companies on it too. So what our thought was to bring this actually in-house. It's going to streamline the system more, but what it does with our contract is that we'll actually be getting a credit on the contract because we'll no longer be getting an external person. So it'll be a percentage of his salary that we get credited out of contract. The other big thing that we're going to try to do is when people get the letter in the mail, we continue to tell them that it's not intended to be abrasive, but it is. And the reason that it is it has certain things in the letter that are actually required by law. You're required to tell them what the penalty is for noncompliance. So they typically get the letter and they consider it as an abrasive letter that this needs to be fixed. And sometimes people fix it, but other times the common thing is to turn all of your neighbors in for their violations as well. But the goal is to establish so that this is not abrasive. It's intended to correct the violations. It's not an income generator. So what we're also adding into there is a courtesy email. So now if they don't respond to the courtesy email, then I don't have any sympathy when we send that first letter out that they haven't provided a solution. So I'll put all of this in the procedure so the board can see everything. Mhm. And the goal is to make its violations, it's not intended to be a negative, it's intended to be that we're protecting property values, that you don't want the guy at the RV in the lot next to you.
A method for compliance.
Sean, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I brought up a few issues regarding our landscaping in the neighborhood. If we're going to be going out pointing out certain issues when our own landscaping along the promenade on the islands looks pretty rough, and including right out in front of the clubhouse, the four-way stop sign here.
Well, you're gonna have a chance in a little bit to vote on that, so we can.
To talk about that, I'm just talking about just
Yeah.
trimming up the grass. I mean, a
No.
person with a weed eater or a landscaping company,
Yeah.
as they go around doing the landscaping, 5 minutes to just trim up these islands where they're flowing over.
We're actually going to be putting new plants, but let me get into that, Jason. The topic though is 100% because I've had in the past I had one that we wrote for power washing a roof that wrote me a letter back that the roof on the club was not power washed. She's absolutely right though. The fact is I hired a power washer and we have the same standard that they should have.
Because if you look, and I took some pictures, I can show it to whoever if you're not sure what I'm talking about. I brought up this issue a few times. Also sent an email in July bringing up this issue, and it looks disturbing. Except for phase 3 that are relatively new islands, if you start at the front gate looks like Disney World, and it looks like Disney World right here in front. But if you go and look at where every monument is, Verdmont, I think I saw Bellingham as I came in here, looks really rough, where the grass is flowing off the curb onto the roadway. Like, why are we maintaining that?
Let me get into this, Jason, because
Okay.
it's going to be a topic here that we're going to speak a little more on everything.
Sean, can we put a sentence in the formal letter? Can we put a sentence in the formal letter that indicates that, as prescribed by Florida law, we are required to inform you? And that may buffer that abrasive feeling a little more.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, the last two that I got one on there, and I got one extra one is one of the things I just want to get a little definition on is shutting club privileges off for 90-day delinquencies, and this is just on a procedure. Obviously, if somebody's 90 days delinquent on a property and they owe us $2,000, there's no reason that they should be able to use the club privileges. And what we do is we shut those off after 90 days, but I want to be sure that we're following the proper protocol. So that was given out to the council, which I'll report back to the board on, just to make sure that we don't have to formally recognize each one of those, that it can be done in a general context. And the last thing was just something that was given to me before the meeting. I know Marilyn can probably comment on this too, but I think they're breaking ground for the new fire station tomorrow up on the corner of Pine Island and Burnt Store, right by the fruit stand up there. So it'll be for Sandoval. We have a fire station that's much closer than what we've been used to. And I'll get into yours a little more specific, Jason. Okay. All right.
Good.
They're already breaking ground today. It's as you head down Pine Island Road towards Pine Island, just a half a mile from the traffic light on the left.
Yeah. And that is it.
Okay. Any questions? Any more questions for Sean?
Just for the record too, that's Pine Island Fire Station. That's not Cape Coral's. They won't be coming into Cape Coral jurisdiction.
They won't?
No,
No.
our nearest one is still gonna be the new one, which
Okay.
is up where just north of Tropicana, I think it is.
Yeah, it's Tropicana. Yeah.
They only come into Cape, I'm pretty sure, whenever they're called for like a backup unit.
Okay. So they'll be occasional, but it won't be our primary unit. Okay.
I think they'll be covering Matlacha and pushing towards the island, so.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Let's see. We're on the committee reports, communications. Hi, Doug. Welcome back. How you feeling?
Thank you. I'm Doug Willett. established this committee. The board established the committee in April. We appointed members, you appointed members in May, and we got underway, and we've been going for about 6 months now. The main focus of the committee really is to see if we can find some ways to improve both the quality and the quantity of communications, both from the board to the residents, residents to the board, and so forth. We have a long way to go to do that effectively, but I think we started to make some good progress. I'd like to particularly thank Don Wells for being so supportive of this effort and really leading us in it. When we were established in April, we produced a list of 18 recommendations that we wanted to pursue, and as of today, we have completed about half of those. And that is such things as establishing the committee, getting the membership, putting together a board communication policy, which the board adopted, addressing a social media policy, which the board also addressed, and getting underway with a major revision of the web page, livesandoval.com, and a number of other things. Among the things we haven't had time to address yet are a communication survey that will identify the strengths and weaknesses of our current communications process. We hope to get a newsletter of some type together and periodically published, probably online, although there will be some print version as well. We also hope to take another look at the new resident orientation program and see if we can assist in making that a little more useful for our new residents. We've added 2 additional tasks to that list since we started at the request of the board and the general manager. One is we are revising the new resident handbook and working with a edit that Sean did, and Maurice Lamontagne, who is our good buddy, still up in Toronto at the moment, but he'll be back in November, but he's working on that as our lead person there. And we're also looking into the notion of coming up with a new logo and mark for the Sandoval Homeowners Association. And then what we'll do with that is we will bring that to the board, and certainly that's something the board needs to have full discussion about. The project we're probably most proud of to date is the website, livesandoval.com. If you haven't taken a look at that recently, I would encourage everyone to do that. We are making major revisions to the content of that page. We're adding new pages. We're providing a lot more information than was ever there before. Among the things that are in the new features of the page are a section with common everyday questions or information, which answers a lot of recurring questions that I see repeatedly from people on Facebook and others. And the information is all right there. What to do with CenturyLink, how to deal with problems with your connectivity, what's the procedure for getting a parking or a gate pass, and all those kinds of things are all there. In addition to that, we've added or will be adding a new page for the Clubhouse expansion, so you'll be able to understand all of the features of that and how the progress we're making there. We've added a page for snowbirds for things to think about in terms of making the transition from north to south and south to north, for that matter. We've greatly expanded the lakes page with a tremendous amount of new information about the health of the lakes and how to keep those. It goes along with the discussion you guys had earlier. And finally, we've added a hurricane prep page, which is something you can get elsewhere by Googling, but in any case, we pulled it all together and are offering that. So I want to particularly recognize Denise Netchfeld, who's sitting over there, who is leading this project and working very closely with Sean to make it as effective as possible. assistance. We are helping them write and edit many of the releases that are going out. But we need to continue to get better at recognizing and acting on opportunities to communicate more. There's a lot more things we could be talking about that we let slip through the cracks and we miss opportunities. With the return of the snowbirds, we hope to move forward with some type of newsletter soon. Ken Franklin will be leading that effort once he arrives back. He may be here by now. And then finally, the committee will be holding its second official meeting in the next couple of weeks, and we continue to encourage people to volunteer to participate in what we're trying to accomplish. And then finally, I'd like to publicly thank Karen Ross, who has represented me at the last few meetings and did a terrific job.
Doug, thank you so much, and I can't begin to express the appreciation for the effort that you guys have put in and the performance you have done. It's been fantastic. One person once said to me, Kilrain, an engineer you may be, but you are not a writer. And I took it to heart, and this man has done great things with words that impress all of us. And the effort has been above and beyond, and it's been greatly appreciated, and look for much more. How's your health, Doug?
My health is good, thank you. Operation a couple weeks ago. Let me say that I think we've made some good progress, but we've got a long way to go.
For sure.
We've got a lot of low-hanging fruit that we've been picking, but there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done on communications within this organization, and we need to have residents feel like they're fully informed.
Yeah.
And I think we've got a real challenge ahead of us. So I look forward to working with all of you to do that.
It's a pleasure to watch a pro in action. Thank you. Okay. Grounds and Lake subgroup. Grounds first. Ernie.
Okay, is this on? Testing? No?
You're on.
Okay.
You're on.
All right. Okay, my name is Ernie Giordano, the chairman of the Landscape Committee. Let's start with the yesterday we had the canary palms up at the main entrance. We're given what's called a diamond cut to give the wow factor. Trimming was completed by Marco's Tree Service, and they did another great job. Crawford is trimming the shrubs on the Esplanade all this month. It's pretty big property. To go over some of this stuff here, we are redesigning the plantings on the monuments and the center islands. We will be removing the top 2 inches of the roots. We will be replacing the dirt and putting in new plants. The new plants will be gold mounds and green island ficus. This will be completed after the cement curbing is fixed. This should be started within 2 to 4 weeks of cement curbing. To address what you had said, Jason, you're right. I just texted him and said that there's times I've gotten out of my truck and have gone there and trimmed them myself in the middle of what I was doing. One of the other reasons why I'm redesigning it, it takes a lot of maintenance, it's a little sloppy. Also, the right way to do this is the reason why we're having some other issues is we need to take some of those roots out, and we're going to replace some of those roots with some fresh soil. So that should make a big difference. And the green island ficus is a plant that I found that is very popular in South Florida. It's I'm not sure if it's plant of Florida, but it was, I think, voted the plant of Florida for 2001. So it does very well here. The Purple Martin house has been cleaned out and is ready to receive new Purple Martin families. We started to put in additional hardwood trees in the Barkley Dog Park for additional shade for the residents and for the dogs. We will be, like Sean had said, we will be removing the brick pavers at the entrance of the dog park. The roots are pushing through the pavers, and we'll be replacing them with like a sort of a river rock that's already there. We'll just be replenishing it. In the future, we will be re-landscaping the pool area when the construction is completed. There's some stuff that we've put in there that before didn't do too well, and some of the stuff that I'm not real happy with. So just like the stones that are around the trees, they're not doing real well, and the kids will be kids, and they tend to take the stones and kind of move them all around, put them inside the plants. It's kind of a sloppy thing, so I'm going to have them removed, and we're going to go back to mulch and in some plants that'll be a lot more Florida friendly. Other than that, I just want to say that my wife and I just came back from the Bahamas. We went to the Atlantis. We celebrated our 35th wedding anniversary.
Are you bragging or complaining?
But what I'm going to say is it was a multi-billion-dollar property, I'm sorry. And when I walked, I spent the day walking the property to get some ideas, to look at different plantings. And you'll be happy to know that 90% of the plantings that were there are what we have.
That's
so
good.
I guess we're on the right track.
Yeah.
Yes.
Question about the islands. If we remove those tuberals, will we be able to get rid of the black border?
We're going to try and take it down about 2 inches. So yeah, there's a good possibility that we could remove that black border. If we take down 2 inches, because right now it's probably about that much above.
Yeah.
So when we take the 2 inches down, it's going to be 2 inches below grade. So when we do put that, we probably will be just about where we need to be, so that it shouldn't be overflowing. So that'll probably help. But we need some dirt in there, because basically, and basically, yes, basically what it is, because I put the plants in there before, probably about 8 years ago, and it was like digging in cork. That's all that was there, was nothing but roots. And I had 5 guys quit on me. I bought $100 shovels and sharpened them every day in order to get that completed. It was probably just about when Sean had taken over, just a little bit prior to that. So that's how far back it was. But yeah, it's nothing but roots. So we're going to have Crawford come in. They're going to scrape out 2 inches and put some dirt back in there, and we'll be starting fresh with a lot neater. Yeah, and like I said, I want to do something a little more Florida friendly.
Similar to what we've done in the circle.
Yes, yeah. So I think that'll help a lot of the problems. Some of it is trial and error, and I've learned from some of my mistakes. I'm not sure how they're going to do it. We're going to discuss that. But no, they got to have a machine, because there's no way that they can do that with a shovel. Absolutely not. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ernie? Thank you, my friend. I think the place looks good, with the exceptions noted. So, and I'd probably walk past and wouldn't know it anyway. So
Those palm trees look awesome up front.
they do.
Hi, I'm Jim Niehaus with the Lakes Subcommittee. Sean, I just got to commend you on you made a clever point about your GM meeting to talk about the aeration. You said we'll get together and air it out. I don't know if you caught that, but I did. You know, and
That's what he's going to pump too.
right. So, as long as it's not hot air. So I know it was a couple things that were brought up during the meeting. I'll comment on the service history log. It's an Excel-based report that's been developed, and it's been almost 4 years in the making, and it consolidates all of our service history, and it computes numbers at the end, so we can really get a pulse on the overall attention the lake's been given by our vendors, and that's provided they're giving us good information as well. So I had distributed that to the board. I guess it was back in August. Just to put it out there for comment. It is something we'd like to link in to the Lakes and Ponds web page, so they have that resource. And the group has requested a little bit of an explanation as people get into that, because it can get a little technical. But if the legends are there, the things are colored in such a way that it makes it easy to interpret the data. It's having the numbers and not the names of the lakes that probably makes it difficult to make the translation to the actual physical lake. It was brought up a little talk about the fish kills, and Sean, in my records, I have 4 fish kills that we've had this year. The first 2 were related to the vendor activity of the spring, which caused the lethal drop in the dissolved oxygen. So the second 2 were not, and I talked to the vendor. Just happened to catch them with those, but it was not related to any treatment that was done. It was more of a weather phenomenon. I think we had some high winds that came through, some turnover of those lakes, and one was recent. It was on the Wynwood Lake, just in a small cove, so it was just a very limited area where this fish killed. But I mean, there were some fairly large fish in that area. So, but they did the cleanup on that. I guess it would always help us if there are those instances, is to really kind of document the weight of the amount of fish that are taken out, because I know, Don, in some of the when the second one occurred, we didn't really know the degree of that. So if we had some measures, some data, that just kind of helps us quantify.
Jim, if you could just elaborate a little bit on it. This just discussed the difference in DO from the bottom of the lake to the top, and the density of the various water at various temperatures, and when the cold front comes in, how that can flip and invert the lake, and so that the DO is then stratified throughout.
That you asked this, because we just did a presentation at a middle school last week, and I have graphs and everything, and I had them in my hand before I came to the meeting. I'm like, I probably won't need these, but the dissolved oxygen, it goes through changes from day to night. When the algae in the plants are producing oxygen during the daytime, so we have an increase, a buildup of oxygen, and that's provided we have a sunny day. It's more of a recovery time that the oxygen builds, and then as the sun goes down, the algae, it goes through a respiration cycle where it actually consumes oxygen. So we see a drop at night. So most times when we have a fish kill, it occurs very early in the morning prior to that recovery. And when we have several cloudy days, we don't quite recover to a level that's sustainable, and that's when it gets a little more dangerous for the marine life in there.
And it's compounded in the colder seasons when a cold front might come in, because that cools down the surface water, and it causes that water to become more dense. When it cools, it goes down and it flips the actual lake. So that's even another mechanism by which the low-level DO is brought up to the top of the lake. So it's those two competing or complementary factors that really, and we're coming on that season right now. In the next couple months, I wouldn't be surprised if we have a couple more fairly large fish kills out there, depending on how bad a front we get in here and how much poor cloud cover or a lot of cloud cover we have during those days. So let's hope we have nice sun and not a heavy-duty cold front hitting us. So.
And the destratification of the lakes just occurs over time, is the dead organic matter, because when they treat the weeds, they treat the algae, all that matter dies, and so when the bacteria decompose those items, they consume oxygen, so we end up with almost a dead zone at the very bottom of the lake. And when you get the high winds that come through here, and this can happen any time of year, you're going to bring up that deoxygenated water from the bottom and mix it with the top, and so that can cause a fish kill. And we did include a lot of, not a lot of information, but enough information for residents, to learn more about the role that dissolved oxygen plays in the water, and also what kind of causes can happen, the things that can lead to a fish kill, just so we're more fully informed on the subject. So just to get into my report real quick, just an update on the lakes monitoring program. Lake Watch has really been the focus for us, because this is what certainly what I feel is is the major leagues of water quality monitoring. We did complete the sampling on the 6 designated program lakes last week. The scheduling of that was coordinated with all of the trained UF volunteers that we have in our community now. And I'm actually setting up a schedule that I send out so people have an opportunity to respond. We can fill it in. Everything's online, so it makes it a little more simplified to manage. We had 4 residents which responded, and 2 were actually able to participate. So this was helpful. But this same cross-training approach, we're going to take that in early November, because we really need to increase the volunteer engagement, because this is a big commitment to do this monthly, and it's not a very simple task when you have to organize supplies, materials, kayaks, transportation, and actually getting to the physically going out on these lakes. Luckily, I enjoy being on the water, so for me, it's something like I said, I enjoy. So I'm going to also pursue an additional on-site training by having the UF program coordinator visit our community as he goes through the south part of Florida to collect all of the water samples. This way, we'll really boost our resources. The highest response we had to the volunteer recruitment was for water sampling, so this is good. Hopefully we can capitalize on that a little more. And Sean, I'd like to really get that videotaped when Dan comes in here to capture that. He talks a mile a minute, so we're not talking about a lot of recording time, but to really have that record and have that available on the website so residents can hear it straight from the source. And before we really want to get that to the point before we launch into this Lee County Pond Watch. I had hoped to be well into that program, but it's been a lot of work just to get the knowledge base set up for the Lake Watch. We now have available this online base for all things Lake Watch, and it includes a complete library of all the water management guides, the pamphlet, the volunteer materials, links that they can click. It has all of the Sandoval maps now, and Carol just was kind enough to print some sets up. But these are things that I'll be laminating, because these are things we take on the water, so we can pinpoint our measurement points on those lakes, because we collect from multiple open water points each time that we're out. But it's got all the GPS coordinates for the sampling stations, an overall reference number to know physically where the map is. I've included a sampling log, so we're keeping a record of what we've done, and I've gone as far as including the individuals that participate in that too, and linking in the results, so we've got updated results that are online now and available. And I'm maintaining a list of all the trained Lake Watch volunteers that are on there, which will hopefully see that list grow. There's an incredible amount of inventory management associated with this. I got 4 bins, large bins, that in my garage that I'm able to maintain all of the consumable supplies. As far as we've been equipped with 2 separate kits to assist us with the collection as well as the processing of samples. And I've also included on that knowledge base a complete set of all of our engineering drawings of all the drainage basins and structures. Couple issues noted during our last sampling cycle. We have on a lake here, Ashbury Lake, we have hundreds of waterfowl that are pretty well established on that lake. This is a concern because the reason that they're there is because they're actively being fed by residents, and that's certainly not my favorite lake to go to anymore. We noted some, and this was surprising, this is the first time I've seen it in here, is some invasive water hyacinth in the Marville Lake, as well as water lettuce, which has been treated by Solitude. So that seems to be under control now. But the water hyacinth has a pretty dark history in our area. It once covered the Caloosahatchee from Cape Coral to Fort Myers. It basically stopped any boats from using that water, and it was a tremendous, it's one of the worst invasive weeds in the world, aquatic. I did complete migration of all of the lake monitoring program documents and materials to the Google Drive that's associated with the Sandoval Lakes Gmail account that we set up, because then, it appears more group oriented. And we're developing the beneficial and the nuisance aquatic plant guides that are very specific to the species that we have here. And, this will help with the lake keeper assessments, and it will include a score sheet, so we're trying to simplify this and be able to also quantify this information, and we'll use a Google form so everything can be automatically tallied. But we're going to look at things like the beneficial plants. We'll be assessing the diversity, the density, which with respect to the shoreline, and the shelf coverage, the planting shelf coverage, and the overall health. And then, looking at algae presence, the type of algae, abundance, nuisance plant presence, type and abundance, and then also invasive species present, type and abundance on those, so we can really kind of get a quantifiable measure on a lake and something we can trend over time. I do have a couple of questions for you guys, but I guess I can answer any questions first.
It is not beneficial, and I don't think it's allowed for residents or citizens to feed wildlife. So this is what you were indicating by the great number of birds.
Yes, and it's on here.
Illegal feeding the wildlife, am I correct?
Yes. That was one of my questions for Sean, was relative to that, because we've had some discussion. Anything else? Sure.
We did the sampling. When do we get, how long will it take us to get the results? And then what is your comment on the results?
And those results are online. It is, for someone just walking into it, it's going to be a lot to digest, because that's why there's a library. Is the very first tab of the workbook for all things Lake Watch, because you really got to kind of get up to speed on your ABCs for water management to understand those results. But we're seeing a range of age. Some of them have reached kind of that later stage, hyper-eutrophic. That's where they become, highly productive biologically, and where we can see large algae production. And when we get a lot of algae production, we get larger swings in that DO cycle can occur, and that's, that can collapse, the point that it's cloudy. But, the Marville Lake had a pretty low rating in terms of its age. When we first measured that in 2015, we were practically hitting the bottom with the Siki disc, because we do a vanishing point measurement at those stations, and we not only, we see where the disc vanishes and record that, so we're getting some pretty incredible numbers there. The last couple rounds they did there, they weren't as impressive. So there has been some change over time on that particular lake, but it did come in at a very young classification in terms of its trophic state.
Maybe I misinterpreted. I thought John's question was, when are we going to see the sampling of the results of the later sampling? Are you saying that the results are already in?
I know that I forwarded those to the communications committee, and we're circulating the write-up, and that was one of my questions. I think we sent this off for the final comments to the group, and I'm just wondering where things stand. I've been so busy this week. I'm off in the water in Matlacha, but I haven't had a chance to email to see what. It's in someone's court.
Yeah. We have the write-up. It has been out for comment, so I think once we compile that, we'll try to get this published within the next week.
Okay, great. So the link will be there. It also links into the service history, and I owe you that, simple explanation of what you're looking at there. So the other question I had, I've had some out-of-pocket expenses for the Lake Watch. You know, these are things like laminating sheets, permanent markers, clipboards, Ziplocs, and storage bins. So
They're covered, Jim. Just
Okay.
pass in your expense report to Sean. And
just itemize. It'll be in an Excel spreadsheet when I send that to you. So make my job easier.
just don't have too many cases of Stella on it. You know?
Yeah, that's always afterwards. So, Sean, we had talked about the feeding of wildlife, and you were discussing sending out an eyes and ears announcement to that, and quite possibly involving the FWC, because this is it's unlawful to feed wildlife, and it does carry a hefty fine in the event. I'm sure there's a warning that process that they go through. But this is creating a contamination issue in that lake, and I really don't get excited about going on that lake, knowing that those waterfowl are there, and the different types of nutrients that they're producing, especially when they're well fed, that's flowing into our lakes, and we see it in the results for that lake too, and especially its level of biological productivity is quite high.
What I'm going to do, Jim, is I will put out an eyes and ears specific for lakes. Some of the things. The other thing that we have the problem with is people cutting down littorals. That you can see specifically where they cut them down because it's on the lot line. But we are going to do an eyes and ears. On the downside of that, I did talk to FWC. The penalties they have are exclusive for feeding alligators and feeding raccoons. And I was thinking it was a higher dollar, but it's $100 is what she told me. They don't have a specific rule against feeding ducks. So it was going to defer on either our municipality if we have anything there, or if not, then I can write them a letter almost similar to a violation then, so we've got it.
Because my initial thought when I saw that, and we collected samples that day, and I have to set those, I have to quarantine those samples basically in a separate cooler and then process those last, and I store them in my personal freezer, and so I try not to tell
No, thank you,
try to
Jim.
bury them so my wife's like, doesn't ask me a lot of questions, but I first thought maybe that lake needs to be dropped from Lake Watch because of this resident activity. It almost disqualifies it because we get this artificially high number of
counted several hundred mallards on one lake. Yeah.
It's overwhelming to go out there, and some of the ducks seem a little aggressive. They start coming like towards you, like you're wondering, and they're sending off a greeting party or something. So but I've got a paddle, so I would definitely protect myself.
Jim, thanks for not inviting me over for gumbo.
Yeah, I hear those Muscovies are good eating, is what I've heard. So I don't know. Maybe that's what they're being raised. They're being farmed. I couldn't tell you. So just one other thing I had. A couple other things is the alligator weed. We're still having this ongoing problem on a lake up in Phase 3. And Sean, I'm wondering, are there any updates from our current, or even from our prospective vendor, on changing up our control strategy there?
I'll send you a text. They sent me what the actual product they're using is a second one now, which is a little more aggressive, and I'll get that to your group. But I don't have a clear answer on why the alligator weed is so strong this year. But it's not specific to that lake. Like when we rode even lakes 1 through 6, we saw a lot of it. And we haven't seen that in the past. But if you don't treat it properly, then this thing just multiplies very, very quickly. So.
And I think the issue there is we've had, we don't have a lot of littorals. There's a lot of open space. I mean, and I've seen it there in past years. So that weed has really taken control. And the reason it's probably such a problem now is because through the repeated treatment of chemicals, it's developed some resistance to those chemicals. I'm glad they've tried a different chemical, but we're potentially making it stronger, as we go along. So we're looking at options for an insect that we can bring in a biological control, which we learned from the UF Lake Watch rep that they've had a lot of success in Florida. So, we want to consider those least toxic options we can use. And just a closing point on the beneficial littoral plants that we have in our lakes. I think these can easily be considered the most important plant in our community because they provide an ecological function. by, of absorbing the runoff nutrients that come from our yards and our streets. They're actually protecting the health of our lakes. So I know we've had some talk recently about upgrading our landscape standards, and I think these beneficial plants should, and without much question or debate, be at the top of the list when we talk about expenditures on plants, because they are the counterbalance, the thing that counterbalances for the majority of the things that we do terrestrially.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it.
Sure, no problem. The lake and the condos, based on the service history, we haven't done any active sampling there, but I've gone there and I've looked at it, and it's amazing. I mean,
visibly it's notably different. It is absolutely notably different.
Part of its attraction and part of what's helping it is it's surrounded by a lot of native vegetation. The cabbage palms, bring a certain element there. The cypress trees along the lakes and the knees. I mean, it's just a thing of beauty to see that. So I would say that's without a doubt, that's our healthiest lake. The one with all the ducks. Yeah. No, there's no doubt. I mean, there's no doubt that lake's getting a heavy load of nutrients on a regular basis.
Okay.
Ashbury.
Thanks, Jim. Amenities, Rob Purcell reported in earlier. He's not going to make tonight's meeting. He didn't have a report. They didn't hold a meeting last month. They're working on the pickleball presentation. So that's where that stands. ARC committee, Ed? Got Ed? Anything else? Anyone else going to report on the ARC committee? We'll do the consent agenda after this, but okay, so no ARC report today. Yeah, but we're not there yet, Molly. I'm going down to covenants. We got anyone for covenants? Yes, we do. Hey, Mike. Welcome back, buddy. Has Charlie passed on what we discussed in the when he represented you in the last meeting? So, yeah, yeah. Well, what happened was Charlie was asking if we might not be able to include it in a November vote to amend the documents. To do that, we can amend the documents, but only through the two-thirds vote mechanism. And it was going to be a little bit too short of a time frame to properly manage that and get it communicated in a manner that might allow support of that. So we asked that he kind of just back off it for now, put it together, and we could probably do that in the next time when we proceed. There'll be quorum at a members meeting, which would probably be in March. Okay, so kind of like just backing it up a few months, but we're happy to entertain that if, you know, you. Sure, sure. Yeah, and just for the record, the only comments that I've ever received on the actions by you and your committee have been very positive and reflective of a fair process, and thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you, Mike. Rentals, Dave is still up north, and they were suspended until probably November or December, so there won't be any. I just might mention that again on the rentals, that will be part of the ballot, and the urgence of support for that rentals amendment, I think, is a prudent activity, and that it gives us the capability to do background checks then in a manner that can hopefully seek to shield us from some of the bad actors getting in here. And I think it's a wise thing to do and probably fitting for what this community represents and society in general. So it's my 2 cents on it. So if there's any other editorial, I'm happy to.
There are only two subcommittee or sub associations in Sandoval, and both of them do have background checks. Both Somerville and the villas have background checks. And while we have not in the villas had to enact any form of barring anyone, it allows us the opportunity, and same with Somerville, to ensure that we don't get the child molester or someone who is of bad reputation criminally in our community. It's very important, and I as a board member cannot emphasize enough how much we need to support this.
And that requires a 2/3 vote, so we really have to have a pretty good support of it. I was remiss in with the agenda in not adding the liaison representative to comment in this meeting, and I'd like to do so now. Kathy?
There. Hello. We had our liaison meeting on Thursday, October the 4th. There were 20 participants and 5 that were open positions. Well, 2 open, 3 absent. Topics included 1, residential maintenance responsibilities, which included mailbox painting and or repair, power washing of roofs, driveways, and sidewalks. And number 2, residential landscape contract. We discussed why some neighborhoods were under an agreement and why others weren't, and what the percentage would be required if a neighborhood that wasn't on the a contract could be on a contract. We reviewed the Brightview contract, how many trims we get a year, how many mows, etc. And also the consideration of placing the palm tree trimming back in the agreement in 2019. The third subject was speeding in Sandoval. Not too controversial. And the discussions that Sean's been having with the Cape Coral PD regarding that. Feedback from the reps on that were, they wanted to see additional signage and possible speed humps. Fourth, security. We went over Halloween and how we would get the EMT a smoother access to the community in case that was needed. We talked about the wristbands. And the open discussion, we talked about the pool closure and update on what we're going to do with the tile and that. The gate, all of the gates, and light outages. And that's it.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, that's it for committee reports, correct? Okay, consent agenda. We have, I guess, looks like they're over a period of the last 4 or 5 weeks. Is there anyone who would like to have any of these removed? Okay, are there anyone who has a problem with any of the approvals given on this list? Do we got a motion to accept the consent agenda? Second? All those in favor? Opposed? No. Show unanimous acceptance of the consent agenda. And Mike reported out that there were no violation activities, so there's nothing on the consent agenda with violations. Okay, unfinished business, Pine Island Gate, item A, and modification status. So we already discussed a little bit about the road, so let's just talk about the status on the gate construction by Taylor Morrison. You want to update on that, Sean?
All right, you've basically got the ground work done from Collier Paving. The second piece of the puzzle is the LCEC, making sure that we have everything there for the power source, which I think everything's in. I'm not sure if they finished the meter. We'd have to see that. We conference called with CenturyLink that they've got everything hooked up to the curb for power because we need that for Envira. And right now, what we're waiting on is the contractor, Bose, is already lined up to do the pilings with his subcontractor. What the city is requiring is just that we include with the permit that existed a engineering drawing of the actual stanchions to show the support mechanism in there. That wasn't done originally by Taylor Morrison. I don't think that's a big item where it's going to, the permit's already pulled. I think it's just adding it on to that. The Envira's piece is actually not that big. It's the kiosk, and they're even debating whether they're going to wait right now, and they might actually jump in line and get
do it ahead of time. Okay.
The estimated time on an early time is
What gate are they going to ask to go through?
what's that?
There's no gate there. What are they going to ask Envira to do? I'm teasing you.
The estimated time frame is on completion on the early side would be Thanksgiving, and more likely is going to be mid-December. And we're trying to get them to pin down a time when they get this everything approved from the city. But everybody's lined up. Everybody's at this point's been paid. The only pieces that we have on our end, which are being bid out by Honk, which will fall right in line to when the project falls, is we have to cut that section off the corner. It's about 90 feet so that lane can be extended so people aren't going to go over to grass, and then to slim down the rest of that center median all the way up to Coralina. So it's just a matter of getting everything to fit, but I anticipate this is it's not going to be definitely a Halloween deal. It looks like sometime between Thanksgiving and middle of December on when we're going live.
Okay.
That factors in that we get this on the agenda in November.
Yeah.
How do we get this in on the agenda? It seems like every month it slips.
To purchase the property.
Let me tell you what's happened internally on that, Marilyn. You can add to this. The consultant that we had engaged to do that is actively doing it. What he did was, after Marilyn's meeting, I guess he had one subsequent meeting with them, and I guess there was an issue with they had to check with one additional neighbor or something up there to get their consent or something, and that was still hanging up. But he said, just have patience; it's going to happen. But he's trying to get it on there. So, and he's been pretty effective with a lot of things in council. So. Well, no, he's as effective on this as other things, but things take a while. But thank God we got a string to pull on. You know, otherwise we'd have none. So.
It's actually, in the context of it, the city has been very quick. It's Taylor Morrison leading up to this on really everything. So.
Yeah, I honestly, Frank, other than just being able to have it scheduled, the activity within the facility groups and the support groups within the city has been very proactive on this. They've been very helpful, and I think it's there. If you ever watch the council meeting, there's a lot of detail that goes into preparation of all the consent agenda items and all of the property descriptions, and that in itself is a pretty large task. Well, yeah. It's the city owns it, and so to be accommodating to everyone, They like to make sure that the right-of-ways are done. You have to pass on right-of-ways and everything, because all of the neighbors have some consent to right-of-ways or own right, or have been granted right-of-ways for maintenance purposes and other things. So all of that stuff has to get cleared. No, there's stuff and people on the other side too. There's private owner on the other side. So in any event, that's
The only other consideration, which we'll talk about more as it gets closer, is we'll have a staging period on this back gate too, because this back gate, Trafalgar Surfside, is going to go over to a resident only. But there'll be a process that we do on that when we include everything, and there's going to be a period there where we have to really educate the residents on the way things are done.
okay. Any other questions on that? All right. Expansion update, Steve.
Thanks, Joe. Good evening, everybody. A couple updates. First of all, I want to start off with Don. Don gave me some layouts of the pickleball. I was able to put those in. We're only able to squeeze in there 2 courts. 4 courts would have been, we'd take out half of the tennis courts we could, but no. 2 courts, I've added that into the site plan. So we're able to put that in as an impervious surfaces, and I'll put that incorporated into the drainage. So that'll be there, and we'll have that available. So whenever that's down
That
the road, it'll
project
be phased
matures.
in.
Okay.
Next Tuesday, we have a meeting, or I have a meeting. I know I've offered Joe to come to the pre-app meeting with the city in order to go through the PDP application. Once that's a mandatory meeting. Once that meeting is completed, then shortly after that, I'll go ahead and submit the PDP for the expansion of the clubhouse. So we'll have that one in the works.
What time was that scheduled for, Steve?
1:45.
Okay.
And then we've got the plans on the building themselves. We're right at 40% done with those since the last meeting. We are planning on having those at 80-90% right before we actually go and meet with the contractors next week. I will be talking to the contractors and setting them up for November 5th. And I will be talking with each one of them. We have 3 that are pre-selected. It'll be a private bid. We have a bid booklet will be done next week. I will be giving a draft copy to Joe, and so Joe can review it, and whoever wants to review that bid document book, and then we will be giving those to the contractors with like I say, an 80 or 90% set of plans, so he can give us a nice tight bid on those 3, and then we are giving the contractors 1 month, so it'll be the beginning of December before we will get those bids back from the contractors. We'll make a selection shortly after that, and then we'll have them on board to finish out any of the plans, any constructabilities, start getting them into the process. So when we get into hopefully into our January, February, when we go into the full permitting for the plans, we'll be in there, and the contractor will have a full review of those with his comments and everything else in those plans.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Regarding the parking,
Mhm.
there's one way in and there's only one way out. So if you went into a parking space and it was full, you'd have to back all the way back out, trip at the end, another way out. And I can give you an example. The city's done the same thing. Back of 47th Terrace, where the farmers market and all, they've got parking spots that if there's a big curve at the end. So the only way, if you drive all the way in there and you find there's no parking places, you'll have to back all the way out. It's going to be a mess.
That will happen next to the tennis courts because there's no other place to go. That's a common for us to do. On the one that goes out towards the new one, I sat down with Sean and we talked about a cul-de-sac there. That cul-de-sac will take about a third of we got to think about that because that'll take a third of our playground. Because right now what I did is I stopped our parking there. If we put a cul-de-sac in, that'll extend almost, because that's a 60-foot diameter for a cul-de-sac. What I'm proposing to do is what they call in the city of Cape Coral, it's a fire turnaround. You come up, you make a turn, you back up. It's like a 3-point turn. And over next to the tennis court, there is no way. There's not going to be a second entrance there. There's no place to put it unless you start taking out tennis courts and everything else and going back around that way. So that one's going to be that's going to be set the way it is. Too close to stop sign. We got to be at least down. We've got to be 100 feet away from the stop sign for the backup there. That was a preliminary plan you saw a long time ago. I don't know, but we can't put another exit from that X point.
Anything else? Any other questions?
I went through, and one other thing, I sat down with Sean, we went through, and he kept trying to make his office bigger, but I kind of had to put my foot down and hold it to this. But we've revised that portion of the plans. We put extra doors in, moved doors, and so we've made him a little bit more comfortable in how it's going to circulate and where we're going to, store copiers and files and stuff like that. So that's all been taken care of too. But that's where
We were trying to make sure just we can lock everything because we didn't want it open at night with the files that are confidential in there.
We had some extra doors in there that he felt that would be advantageous to take away. So so we wouldn't have too much traffic in that area.
Cool.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you, Steve.
Thank
you. Okay. Pool resurfacing. You caught a lot of this. Anything else to add? Any questions on pool resurfacing that weren't covered in the open discussion? Okay. I think we're then if. Okay. Any objections? This is covered as an agenda item? Okay. ARC guideline recommendations, how are we standing on the legal review of those? And
We got everything back from Caves. We have 2 more that I just got to finish putting in there. I'll send it to him, and we're right on track to where we need to be.
All right, good. Any other questions on that one? Resident concerns and ARC process inconsistencies. You want to elaborate here, Sean, and detail out something what we're looking at here?
This one is I sent to the board. This was a concern from a homeowner that I met with, that also after her letter, that is concerned that there's not a consistency on variances granted. And so the other consideration is that when someone mentions real quick that they're potentially considering litigation, I flip that to the council real quick. What his recommendation was we take a look at this a little bit, the board subgroup, just to make sure that if we have some variances that are concerned that she defined that aren't consistent, that we're not putting the board in harm's way for potential litigation.
Okay, so the issue is not necessarily the standard itself, but equal application of the standard or improper application of standard from one resident to another resident, or inconsistent with other resident application of that standard?
I think it's both. It's the variances are that they are equal, and there's one variance particular that there's a question of whether it was approved by an individual or the group.
Okay. So the path forward that's been recommended would be to do a sub panel of the board. So do we got 3 volunteers to the charter for that sub panel would be to evaluate the complaint and come back to the board with a finding of fact on the basis of the complaint being valid or not. We got Al? Got 2 more? I'm looking for 3. Okay. Frank? Anybody? Okay. Those 3. Okay. And Al, if you see anything else in the process, where Frank and Jason flag it out, so not necessarily with respect to this charter, but something we can do to improve that process. Okay. If anything, what this process needs to be, it needs to be consistent in the application of the documents from individual to individual, and it needs to be done in a manner that doesn't put the association at risk for real, true liability on it. So they're the 2 guiding issues. Okay, any other discussions on that? And I guess probably, if we could ask, it's probably not going to be correct for November's meeting, but maybe for December's meeting. Okay? All right. Transition complaint related litigation measures. This was put on the agenda with respect to the understanding that the notice would be out and the communications release would be on it, and to urge the emphasis in how important it is for positive affirmation of support to be able to proceed with litigation. It's not that there's an intention to do litigations right now as a primary focus, but it needs to be there. It would be supportive and add additional leverage in any negotiations we have as a means to an end. Any open discussion on that among the board? Okay, I think the communications was pretty basic in the parameters we're looking at. And having said that, I'll just carry forward with that topic. So we're going to move forward on this. Okay, bars.
All right, we have three budget authorization requests. I'm going to work my way back, so these are the smaller ones. First, start with number 20. What I've done this year too, we've done a lot of these. I don't think we've ever had 20 budget authorization requests. We've really been on top of this. The budget authorization request number 20 is the replacement of a computer system in Office 2. This is reserves item 5.111 with the $41,135 available. This is for a tower workstation with a monitor to include the Microsoft Office and the noted hardware to replace a 5-year aged PC. This is actually for the new employee. We want him to have access so that he's able to do his position properly. And the PC it's 5 years. It's not going to. We need something better. So the prices that we looked at for the type of computer and monitor range from $1,759 to $2,799 for comparable units. Recommendation is to have the unit built from the company that services our computer, South Florida Tech Group, which it also includes the quarterly service where they remotely go in quarterly to clean the unit, make sure that nothing is done with it on a program similar to our other PCs. It's got a limited 2-year warranty on the main part of everything. Recommendation to the board is $1,859.86.
Okay. Got a motion to accept? Okay. Second, discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Opposed? Unanimously passed. Okay.
All right, the next one is, this one I'm sort of working backwards. We had a need to actually fix the men's shower, so we originally were going to do this out of operating, and Frank and I were we found out that we weren't billed on this thing for when we did this, 3 or 4 months ago. Yeah, that a company doesn't care about, or at least send us an invoice. But we contacted the company. Obviously, we owe them money on it, so that it actually is allocated properly to the reserves. I put the picture in there so you could see their work. What was happening is, you wanted to explain it, Al? It was the water going behind the tile.
Water went behind the tile and softened everything up. The tiles were coming loose from the wall.
Yep. So
I think people were picking at them too.
it ended up being a pretty large job. They were in there for pretty much all week on there, and then the following week they finished up. But they had a real nice match to the other tile, as you can see in the picture. It looks it's consistent. They replaced the whole. Yeah, they did not only the tile, but all of the fiberboard behind it. They had to rip all of the old out and put brand new board, brand new tile, everything. So it was. That's really not a bad price. It's not. Yeah, for the labor in there.
Moldy drywall behind that.
Yeah.
I had similar in our house on 29th, and it was around the same price, and this was 5 years ago.
The renovation of tile work in the men's showers to replace the damaged tile and wallboard with the internal leak to matching the surrounding color and texture. The companies were looked at. This was the lowest company, which was Trebbing Tile at $5,371.11. The other ones were closer to $6,000 with additional fees. I think the project would have been closer to $7,000 with the other companies. Project was completed under operating expenses with low bidder. Recommendation to the board is that the proper allocation is allocated to the reserves.
Okay. Got a motion to approve? Second. Okay. Discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passed and accepted. Thank you.
Okay, the last one is the landscape replacements. We've had a focus this year initially on the fence lines. If you remember, we did the budget authorization request for the Calusias down the fence lines. We're hoping to get a buffer, and the concentration right now is identifying what we consider the weak areas, which are really three. And we're going to bite off two of them in this proposal. First is the monuments, and then second is inclusive of the swimming pool, of trying to update since we're doing the project. The third, which we will put on, which will likely be either the end of this year or possibly going into 2019, are going to be some work on some of the cul-de-sacs that aren't up to the same standard as some of them that look really good. With this one, it's focusing on the monuments, road islands, and the swimming pool beds. We have the reserves, item 4.5, with the allocated funds. As phase 2 of the cement project, after phase 2 of the cement project, after the cement edges have been reformed and poured, that's likely probably about 3 weeks out. I'm not going to touch any of the plants, obviously, until they get in there and rip out the roots and do the cement work. Once they're completed with that project, then this will be phase 2 that will actually follow that. The existing monuments and road islands will be graded with roots dug out and prepped for the new plantings. The recommending plantings are the gold mounds are the original Bonita Bay design of gold mounds around the Royal Palms. When you go out the club, you can see this right out here. Also, when you go down, like in the Stony Hill neighborhood, you'll see around the palms too. It was a very common thing to do. They're more hardy. They have a sustained well in many areas. Several varieties of the interior plantings were also looked at, with the goal of the designer landscape recommendations to focus on low, so that you have the visual over those islands, but on the same time more hardy plant varieties, including the gold mounds and the green island ficus. If you go to the last page for the purpose of the board, you can see this shows you a pic of what these things actually look like. The gold mounds are essentially what their name implies. They're like a bright gold color. There's several ways that you can trim them, but it goes well around the trees. And then the green island ficus is used in a lot of the high-end communities as a border as well. In addition to that will be a partial pool replanting. As Ernie stated, we're going to be looking at some areas that we have stone, where it's much more likely we're going to switch back over to the mulch. We've got the kids throwing the stones; they end up all over the deck, and then 250 plantings to replace the 12-year-old beds on the pool. Same companies were looked at on a per unit basis. From Danny Yates, Brightview, Good and Green, and Crawford. Prices on a 3-gallon plant range from installed price from $12 to $15 is your common range. Recommendation to the board is to proceed with Crawford Landscaping with install-based post-concrete work. When you look at their pricing, you can see that we're looking at a total on the proposal sheet of 296 3-gallon gold mounds at $12 a piece, 230 green island ficus at $12 a piece. Your labor to remove all of the dirt, dig that unit out, and replace with the new soil at $7,200. That's going to be the big part of the job, is trying to clean that area up. And with Don's question, it's probably likely that we'll be able to remove the black, but we have to see before we say that, like how far down they can get with it. But that would be a good goal. And the pool area replanting, 250 plants. That'll be multiple varieties that they've recommended. That will look at Dwarf Schefflera, the same two varieties out there, and then trying also to incorporate some color on the pool deck. And that is 250 plants at 3 gallons, $12 a plant, 3,000. Total on the bid is $17,162. And recommendation to the board is to proceed with phase 2 after the concrete project.
Okay, got a motion to approve? Second? Okay. Discussion?
One question, when are these 250 plants going around the pool?
It's going to be the beds primarily around the pool, but then doing some of the exterior as well. It's some of the plants are just weathered, they're aged, and it's trying to clean that whole area up. We could have done probably a lot more plants, but we're limiting it to 250.
Is this anywhere near where we're going to extend the
No. What Frank's referring to is we're looking at extending the deck, and no, it would make no sense to plant anything there. Yeah.
Any other discussion? Okay, call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion passed. Okay, that is for bars? Okay. On to new business, a common area. Sean, you just want to update on the various landscape proposals, where we stand. I think you'd covered the residential pretty well, but maybe getting back on the other two.
This is actually a good one, though, because a lot of times, even if you're extremely happy with a vendor, you want to validate pricing, that you're not paying above market comparison. We had Greenscapes, Crawford, and Brightview all bid the common area, and they're within $7,000 of each other on a major proposal. So I'll review those with the board, but very comparable on the pricing.
Okay. All right. Any discussion on any of those? I just wanted to make sure that it was disclosed who he was dealing with, and we had it up on the table for everyone. Okay. Moving on. Surface water compliance certification, and I'm reminded, and my apologies for Jim Schweigert corrected. It's not irrigation water tax rebate status, it's storm water. So Jim, if you're listening at home, it's storm, and I recognize that. Thanks, Jim, for pointing it out. But Jim has played a major role in helping us to manage this whole process over the years. And the change, as we discussed in earlier meetings, has been that the city's new ordinance actually looks at all the out parcels in addition to our own in this basin. Anything that's in the basin has to get a certification that it's being maintained properly and operating properly in both the dry and wet season. And that caused a little bit of frustration this year in that we had good compliance with the other out parcel members being Coralina and Surfside, but the Iberia Bank was a little bit slow. They were finally convinced, I think through a violation notice by the city, that they should get this cleaned up, and they did. And so we got successful compliance with all the R parcels, and that was again approved. And thanks to Jim's efforts in doing this, we worked with Avalon Engineering on the certifications. And in future years, there'll be a decision to be made as to whether or not we want to maintain control of all of the certifications for the out parcels too. And that's a matter of, really, it makes it a little bit more efficient process for Avalon in being able to come up with one, but then we're going to be on the hook to make sure that we have proper cost-sharing arrangements with the out parcel people. We do have one properly constructed with Surfside that pays for it. We'll have to discuss it with Carlina and also the Iberia Bank property. So that's something that we'll have to wrestle over the next period of time. Yes, Don? I'm worried about compliance, and I'd like to control it from that standpoint. I think you're right, and I think it's prudent to do it that way, Don. And the point is, for the lesser amounts that they have, it's de minimis with respect to what the residents in the common areas, yeah, is so outweighed it that it's best to run the risk of not being able to recoup some of the maintenance or the certification cost requirements from them, as opposed to having control and getting our piece. So, yeah. So we're going to be discussing that with Avalon and the out parcels in the next month or two. So. Um, in any event, I don't think there's any action, but I do want to recognize Jim. I think he published some of the numbers. Total over the years between residents and common areas is now over $1 million. Sean, do you have an update for what this year's was on common areas? Jim also wanted to correct the record. I think the numbers that he was were floating around included some of the out parcels, so it's actually about $10,000 lower than what he was floating. But it's still significant numbers.
We were looking at a number of 25,875, but I think we have to look at the budget numbers, 14,000 and change, and I think some of those are probably out parcels, which we have to define on it.
Okay, all right. Any further discussion on that, or okay? All right. I'm just going to go round robin around the board. Any other comments you want to make or reports you'd like to give, Marilyn? We need one. The corporate mic is lost again.
I don't remember whether it was yesterday or the day before, but looking across our lake, we saw two swans. And when they were still in the same spot from the morning to the nighttime, we realized they were plastic. But for a long time, our dog was excited about seeing those swans out there.
Yeah, I'll be doing it.
I guess that's allowable since they're not fed.
It's probably.
We removed the plastic swans. Unfortunately, we don't allow those, but I think they were put up for a birthday party, so they were neat.
That's good. Cool. Any other reports or comments?
If perchance any of the three members who have volunteered for that investigation for the ARC issue cannot make any of the meetings, can we designate another board member as an alternate so that we can get this accomplished, because we really don't want to drag on.
If we have another volunteer.
I'll be happy to do it,
Okay.
but I'm sure that,
We also volunteer.
Oh, okay, so we'll work this out so
Okay.
that somebody's always covered. But it's important that we nail this down as soon as possible.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Molly. Okay, anything else? Okay, you got a motion to adjourn? A second? Okay. All right, we're adjourned from the formal meeting. It's open for resident comment on open agenda, non-agenda items. The sign-up sheet, anyone do it? Okay. If you could please, Betty, just take, yeah, please.
But I would like to address about the lakes. That's one of the things, because I know that for a long time we've had a problem with the lakes. And when I did research about 6 years ago or 7 years ago, that was the only solution to make them really healthy over the lifetime of the lakes. So I'm very happy to hear that we're going to implement that as far as the aeration is concerned. And that's really all I had to say, because I believe, where is Jim, or did he depart from us? He left. I think he did a very good job of doing everything as far as determining what's going on. And I think it's very sad that they're feeding the fowl over there on Ashbury, that can't be taken care of.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yep. How are you, Marlene?
Is it on now? Okay. I have two things. First of all, it was said during the meeting that down at Calypso Park, the pavers are going to be taken up and rock is going to be put in its place. First of all, we already removed the rock and put pavers in because people were tripping on the rock, people were falling on the rock. So why would we be going back to rock again? I was told a year ago, and I was told recently by two different people, that we were going to put a cement pad there, not rocks. That's dangerous. People have fallen, people have tripped, and it's not a good solution, especially since we took it out once.
Yeah, it's not an easy solution. We actually had we had our insurance agent out here because we looked at a variety of sites and we ran it through him as well. And we had a I'm trying to remember her name, that she tripped on the pavers and she went down out there, and you can see the area where it's really a danger, where it's pushed up. But that oak tree, it's the problem we have in a lot of areas. That whatever you put there, it's going to crack it or push it up. So what they recommended to us is that we consider something that is not able to be pushed, which would be the egg rock.
Which is dangerous to residents. That doesn't make sense, Sean. Doesn't make sense. You can move the pad over a little bit from where that one root is.
I can look at
It needs
it.
a cement pad. It doesn't need rocks that people are going to hurt themselves on.
We can look at it.
And the second one, am I understanding from tonight's meeting that there are 3 groups set up for going out to look at the landscape companies?
Yes, there are, and I do have your name. I've been going through the different ones, and there's a couple people that haven't been contacted, but I'll talk to you after the meeting.
But I thought you were going to set out something to ask for volunteers. You mentioned that in a coffee and conversation 2 weeks ago.
We
and
did.
I approached you about it last week, and you said you were sending it out this week.
I put it in eyes and ears. It already went out to all the residents, and we had 12 or 13 responses, and everybody will be put on a group. Nobody will be, the only ones that, there were a couple that are only available after 6 o'clock at night, and that's not going to work to tour, but everybody else will be on a group.
Oh, our email was off the list, so we didn't get the eyes and ears, so I didn't see it,
Yeah.
so I apologize.
Yeah, talk to me after the meeting, and I'll make sure you're on one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Marlon. Anyone else? Okay, go in peace. So be it.